Okay. All right. So welcome everyone, and thanks for coming to our monthly meetup today. Small little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Make sure your microphone is muted when you're not speaking. It helps to minimize interruptions. The programming portion is going to be recorded for future viewing, and this is a safe space. So please email us at romance@sifwa.org for feedback, questions, or concerns, if you have any concerns. Hopefully, maybe Abigail, you can put that information into the chat for me, and make sure that if you have questions along the way, because this is going to be a Q&A format with Gail, if you have questions along the way, then go ahead and pop those into the chat and I'll work them in along the way. I've got some to get us started, and then hopefully you can feed in folks' questions as we get talking. And if you are viewing this on the events page, and would like to be part of the conversation, like then click the little button to join the Zoom call so that you can jump in and ask your questions in the chat. Okay, we are extremely thrilled to have Gail here today. She is a Gail Carriger, multiple New York Times bestseller, with millions of books in print in dozens of different languages. She writes book hugs, comedies of manners mixed with steampunk, urban fantasy, and sci-fi, and cozy queer joy as G.L. Carriger. She is best known for the Parasol Protectorate and Finishing School series. She was once an archaeologist and is fond of shoes, octopuses, and tea. I am also a fan of tea. And octopuses, who knows? So yeah, I am so happy that you're here today, Gail. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I gotta say, this is sort of a bucket list checklist. Back before I was published, I was a member of SFF, when I had my first short stories and everything. So I feel like this is sort of full circle to talk to you all. So I'm very excited to be here.
So yeah, I thought we could kick things off a little bit with some just kind of like overview questions about just the general being an author stuff. I was looking at your bio, and your first book was published in 2009, and it's going to be 15 years this year. That is crazy. So, and you said on your website that you do something special for the anniversary every year. Are you doing something special this year for celebrating the
Well, it's in October, so I have
yeah.
some time to decide. But yeah, I think I don't know how to put this. Um, I just kind of like to revisit the beginning, partly just to remind myself of what it was like back then, but also to kind of think about backlist and making sure that the world doesn't forget that there are career authors out here who are like still writing. So yeah, it's kind of just like don't forget, like some of you onboarded with Solus and then forgot about me. So how about picking up something I've written more recently, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Um, so before that got published, where kind of were you, like why did you start writing? Like, did you start writing with the intention of being published, or were you just kind of dabbling, or?
So I'm one of those like I write because I breathe kind of situations. I don't
Sure.
know how else to put it. I've always written. I just grew up in a sort of hippie adjacent commune kind of situation, and it was pretty full of bee poets, and I was pretty confident that you did not make a living as a writer because that was my business model. And so I was like, okay, we'll do this archaeology thing, which I also love and still love, but I was all writing, and so I would just write books and write things, and then I might as well try to get them published. And so sort of casual about it at first. And and I have, as many authors do, a trunk full of unpublishable blights, and then sort of will live there forever.
Yep.
And then I wrote Solus as a challenge to myself because the short stories that people had been enjoying from me and picking up from me had all been comedic. And I was like, clearly that's the voice that people really want from me as a writer. So I'm going to challenge myself to do all of these things, this was the first big paranormal, what they called bubble at the time in the 90s. And I was like, well, I would like to write paranormal, but not so dark. I would like to write a strong female main character, but funny, which there was just a dearth of all of these things at the time. I want some romance in there. I want it to be historical because that's my comfort space. And yeah, and Solus was the result, and it was sort of a dare to myself to see if I could do it. And then once it was written, I was like, well, I might as well see if I can get it published. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Um, so back then, was getting it published your initial definition of success, or did you have an idea of what success meant to you?
This is you guys. You sent me some questions ahead of time,
Yeah,
and this was one of them. And the definition of success is a really interesting thing to think about it. And frankly, I encourage all authors to do this. Like, how do you define success for yourself? What are the mile markers you see as success? What's within your locus of control and what's not within your control? Like, what's a good
right.
circle or that sort of a thing. Um, so yeah, I suspect early on, and again, you have to remember this is like before even the ebooks were just a twinkle in the eye of Amazon, right? It wasn't
Yeah,
really happening yet. Podcasts were brand new, right? Audiobooks weren't really a thing except for libraries on CDs. So, it was a different age. And I think my definition was in general to see my book on a bookshelf, but in specific, because I had come out of fandom and writers tracks at various local conventions and world cons and things like that. My particular definition of success was to go and have a meeting in New York with my agent, my editor, wearing a black and white pencil skirt. That was
oh man, that is
specific.
specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it happened, I have to say. My publisher flew me out for BEA just before Solus was about to come out, BEA Book Expo America. And my mother's an amazing seamstress. And so she made a beautiful black and white pencil skirt for me. And I had that meeting at BEA and it was very exciting. So I had my dream come true before my book even came out.
That is awesome. Nice. So once that happened, then like how has your definition of success changed over time? Once you just like checked that one right off the list.
Check right off the list.
Yeah,
I think I like to divide it into two things. Like there are like things I would like to achieve that are not outside of my control. There are things I would like to achieve that are within my control, like how many books I produce a year and that sort of a thing. And then there are like these weird mile markers that happen where you're like, oh, I didn't know I got to have that one. We're like unexpected. I didn't know I got like my favorite story is it was at Y'all Fest, which is a YA festival. So it's all YA authors. It's not sci-fi fantasy, and I come out of sci-fi fantasy, so I'm like alien territory, right?
yeah.
It's down in Charlotte. And so I was there and I'm at a industry party. So it's all people and it's all YA people who I don't know and aren't my people. And I see this just amazing woman walking up the stairs towards me. And she is clearly my people because she is wearing like Grecian robes and she has like a tiara on and stuff. And I'm like, aha, I recognize a fellow nerd. And so I just sort of gave her a big smile, and she's like, "You're Gail Carriger," because I always look like this, and I was like, "Yes, I am." And she said, "You don't know this, but I'm Mercedes Lackey, and I love your books." And I was like,
Oh my God.
exactly. I was like, oh, mile marker I didn't know about. Yeah, it's wonderful. Of course, I lost the ability to speak. Fortunately, my little friend Lauren was with me and she retained her ability to speak. And she was like, Mercedes Lackey, you must come with us. We are going to drink champagne. And Gail and I are going to tell you how important you are to the queer community. And it was, of women my age or girls my age, quite frankly,
Yeah,
because I was definitely a girl at the time when I discovered Mercedes Lackey, a girl who loved horses. Anyway, so that was a really formative moment for me. And then flash forward a couple of years, and I'm at a Worldcon wandering around, and Mercedes Lackey spots me and like waves me over, and then gives me a hug, and I was like, oh my God, am I hugging friends with Mercedes Lackey? um, so yes, there are those mile markers. Back to your original question. um, which is, yeah, all authors are fangirls themselves or uh
totally.
yeah. Anyway, so at this point in my career, 15 years on, I'm a little bit more interested in very practical things like my longevity as an author in terms of like how do I make sure my sales are consistent across all of my books. so that if something goes wrong in my life, my writing career still sustains me. Things like that. You know, like if I can't write
Yeah.
for years, for example, during lockdown, because some of us went that direction as
Yeah.
authors, um, can my do have I built myself up a robust enough and well, how do I put this? Wide, versatile enough backlog of different kinds of content so that when my creative muse fails me, I have an infrastructure in place that supports me. And to answer the unasked question, yes, it did. And yes, I was really lucky that it did. So for me, that is also a kind of success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you're big on measurement. We've talked about,
Data.
analytics and measure all sorts of stuff. So like I know you're big on measuring things. So do you have like metrics that you're working towards? Is that sort of what you're thinking about when you say
Oh,
that? Or are you just, is this more of a,
oh, Oh, what an interesting way of putting it. It's more, so I'm very big, for those who don't know, I'm a big data wonk. It's probably because I have a minor in stats, because I'm a social scientist by training, and my one of my master's degrees is an MS. So I'm a numbers person, spreadsheet person. I like this kind of thing, and I understand that that's very kind of alien to many authors, but I genuinely love it. And I have a big enough fan base so that I can test things on them, and they're sort of used to it by now.
I will put a plug in that you did a really great like two episodes, I don't know, it was two big long YouTube videos with some folks about analytics and
Yes.
analytics for authors and
Yes.
stuff. That's really good.
Yes. If you just Google Gail Carriger analytics for authors, that's since Google's promoting YouTube these days, that's kind of the first thing that pops up. It's this two-part series.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's where I get it's like my dorkdom. I get so excited about this kind of thing. To answer your question, I like curate and monitor my own data a lot more because I don't like to be surprised. So it's not necessarily that I have a target, although I do kind of know sales, for example, I kind of know what good is for me and what bad is, because if it suddenly becomes very good or if it suddenly becomes very bad, I need to emotionally be able to triage why, like what's going on. Did Facebook change the algorithm? Like what happened that caused this change in the data. So it's so I know my baseline, not because it's a target, but because I want to know when things are irregular so that I can try to figure out why. And I will say that actually nothing frustrates me more than like a big boost in something and I have no idea where it came from. I'm always like, damn it. I got a bunch of new subscribers to my not Patreon. Like, what happened? Like, what did I do? What's going on? And then I can't figure it out. I get very upset about it. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. Um, so do you do you have or do you experience imposter syndrome at all?
This was an interesting question because mostly I don't think I do. And I know that's kind of weird to admit to. But yeah, I don't. I don't have
Yeah,
imposter syndrome.
interesting. Do you have any theories as to why you think that is?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm a very sort of realist, grounded person. I'm not really a dreamer or an idealist. And so, like, I kind of know what I write and I know what I do well, and I know what my readers want from me. And that is a formula that is a dynamic that I have just figured out. And I'm not trying to be anybody else in that dynamic. I don't know how else to put it. I don't think I'm saving the world with my like fluffy fiction. I know it really touches people, and I get amazing letters from super fans who are like, I was donating bone marrow to my twin sister, who's dying of cancer, and your books made us laugh in the ward. And I'm just like, that's insane. But also, you're the one who's donating bone marrow. Like, I'm
Yeah.
glad my words helped, but there's words on a page. I think I'm sort of very grounded and realistic about the writing. I don't think it's magic. I think it's an artisan achievement. And maybe that's because I come out of a different art form. I used to be a ceramicist, you know, and maybe it's because of my background in archaeology and studying the nature sort of in an object and production. I don't know. And that's part of it. The other part of it is something that I think is slightly uncontrollable, which is, and I used to say this to my editor on occasion, which is I don't want it in the way that a lot of people want it. I was never hungry for publication and validation that way. It's nice. I love it. I loved seeing my books on shelves. I still am delighted and charmed every time I see my book on a shelf. The New York Times is amazing. I mean, those sorts of things were phenomenal. But I love being an archaeologist. I love teaching. There are other things I adore doing that I could do that aren't writing.
Yeah.
And it was never like I have to be published. It was never a big dream of mine. And I think that really helps with imposter syndrome because I'm always just like, I don't want it that bad, so I never feel like I'm being something inauthentic. Or I mean, I don't I hardly I like I can't even really describe what imposter syndrome is because I don't really feel
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, you seems to me like you have a very strong, I've always thought you have a very strong sense of self. And so I think that's part of it is like you kind of know who you are and it sounds like you know what you write and you're very
Yes.
comfortable with that space.
Yes.
So,
I'm going to drop out for just 1 second and shut my window because, of
okay.
course, the weekend warriors just decided to leaf blow. So I'll be right back.
Okay. I will take this moment to remind folks you are welcome to add your questions into the chat and I will work them in to
Sorry
get this
about
going.
that.
All good. Um, yeah, so in terms of the writing, oh, I will get to that, Victoria, in just a second. What parts of the writing process are easiest versus hardest for you?
Oh, this was a fun question. This is always a fun question. I'm a dialogue heavy author. I get a lot of comedy out of that. I write essentially the thing that's most easy for me is situational and character driven comedy and dialogue. And that's because I'm one of those authors who very clearly sees her characters in her head like it's a movie playing out, often in conversation. I'm not a particularly plot heavy author. That's why I describe my stuff as mostly comedies of manners. Something explodes, and then in my books, everybody runs around frantically, and then everybody sits down and has tea and talks about it. Like it's not we're not in the suspense thriller arena. And so under those circumstances, like really inhabiting your characters and knowing your characters and therefore doing really sort of snappy dialogue is my comfort place. What I am less comfortable with, which is always the next question, is sex scenes and the other kinds of humor. Um, so I always do like humor passes on my books where I will go back in and like do rule of three and witticisms and other kinds and descriptive humor and other kinds of humor and that doesn't come as naturally to me, so that's always a little bit more work. It is the hardest thing. I will fight everybody on this one, but it is the hardest thing to make people laugh with a book. Like I think that's the hardest kind of writing to do is humor. Yeah, I can make you cry, no problem. It's not hard. I can squick you out. I can scare you. None of that is that's not difficult. Making somebody laugh, like belly laugh when they're reading a book, that's very hard.
Yeah.
And so that's always my favorite compliment too, is when somebody always tells me they like woke up their partner because they were laughing in bed reading next to them or something. That's the best.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. Humor is hard.
yeah, and then the sex scenes, I just embarrass myself really easily with sex scenes. So yeah, I actually started writing the GL Carriger stuff, which is my like higher heat line of books. I started writing those specifically because I find sex scenes the hardest things to write, and I was like, I gotta push myself into the area that requires the greatest courage and see if I can do this and do it well and enjoyably and fun. So that in other words, I started a whole different like series, the San Andreas Shifter series, because I wanted to see if I could write, if I could do it. And it's still hard, but I'm
Yeah.
done.
I can relate to that quite a bit actually, and I've actually been thinking a lot about like doing a series that goes in a different direction with more my stuff's all fade to black, so I
Mm.
skip the sex scenes, but I've been wanting to kind of push myself more in that space. So I ooh, I kind of want to dig in there, but I do have some questions in the chat, so I'm gonna like dive into those too. Um, Victoria wanted to know if you could talk more about the origins of the San Andreas Shifter series, and have you done or thought of doing stories set in the history of that world?
The origins of it. So like I said, the San Andreas Shifters was like me pushing myself to write higher heat. And I actually initially thought I wanted to try contemporary romance just because it's the most popular form of romance. And I thought, I grew up in a small town. A small town romance is just should be incredibly easy for me. And I would have done it in the kind of weird, hippie, crazy, quirky small town that I grew up in. I think that would have been really fun. And then I started to write it, and it just like a magical system just immediately linked into it. And I was like, and then
Obviously.
shifters, and I was like, oh, I am married to sci-fi fantasy. I cannot ever get away from it. I just don't like reality enough. I guess I was like, it has to be skewed. And so I set it in the Bay Area and somewhat contemporary, an alt contemporary world, just because it was incredibly easy for me to do that. That's where I live. That's where I'm comfortable with. And then I just have to skew that reality as opposed to what I had been previously and what I am generally known for, which is steampunk, which requires just so much research. So I just wanted to make it easier on myself by eliminating the research component. Um, and it did. They are faster for me to write. So that was sort of the origin of those books. And I wanted to explore high heat, and I wanted to make them very explicitly and very queer out the gate. So hence the reason I chose the San Francisco Bay Area. I was like, not only did all the queers end up here, but all of the supernatural queers also ended up here. So let's do that. So that was the sort of origin of the standard. In terms of like the world building, I can't say that they are connected to my previous universes. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You know what I mean? Um, so for
Publishing, yes.
yeah, publishing. But essentially, one of the things that interests me and the thing I was doing my PhD on was technological evolutions, specifically of inorganic tech in ancient cultures. And so that interests me with how kind of scientists, and this is one of the reasons I write steampunk, how do scientists grapple with the supernatural among us? How does technology evolve when you have those kinds of creatures in your history and then in your Victorian time for that particular series? And then how does our understanding of the way the magical system works, of the way supernatural creatures are injected into reality, change as as science changes. So, you get germ theory, and then you get genetic theory, and you get all of these things that obviously are going to play into our attempts to understand a magical system. So as a magical system evolves from the past to the present, so does the scientific understanding of that system. And so that's always very much interested me. And so that was kind of part and parcel of the San Andreas books, which is, it's very underpinning it. But I'm very like juicy about my world building. I really like it, even though it doesn't always make it onto the page. It's always there in the back of my brain.
I
So
love it. I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah, that's part of the answer to that question, is that I was very much so, like, people are startled that like the language about what we call from Aether has become quintessence and that sort of thing. And I'm like, yeah, but the language of understanding of science changes. Linguistics change. We don't speak the way now that we did in the Victorian era. So we won't be speaking the way about the same magical system as we might in the Victorian era, right? Like everything,
Yeah.
including linguistics, evolves. So yeah, that very delicately allowed me to create an entirely new world that is perhaps not entirely a new world.
Yeah. Love it. That's great. Um, Valerie was asking if there's anything that you would do differently at any particular point in your career, knowing what you know now.
Oh, that's a good one. I would say Tamar Pierce has a lovely phrase, which was applying to a marriage offer, but I think it applies to the publishing industry, which is, it is always easier to turn a no into a yes than it is to turn a yes into a no. So when a publisher comes to you with an offer, for example, don't immediately say yes out the gate. The correct response to that is, how flattering. I'm very excited. Let me contact my agent. And then if you don't have an agent, it's an opportune time to find one, or at the very least, a literary lawyer. So yeah, I'm not gonna say that yours truly made that kind of mistake, but let's just put it out there. Your instinct, I think, should be no and not yes in this industry, especially when you're dealing with publishers and predators and editors and agents and all actors in your life who may be good or bad. Um, Approach with suspicion, I guess, is one of my biggest pieces of advice, including me, including people who are giving you advice. Make sure you research them and understand where they come from and where their money comes from. One of the things I always do when I'm teaching, when I give presentations, is I show numbers. And one of the things I always say is 80% of my income is from fiction sales. I do speaking gigs. I have a nonfiction book, but still 80% of my income is fiction, and I make six figures. So like you can decide whether to trust me or not based on that. But and my perspective, which is also as a career author, is somebody who doesn't have a day job, who wants to make their money and they're living this way and would like to retire eventually, like that's another perspective I bring to the table. But it means that the advice I give and the answers I give in this kind of scenario right here might not be germane to you. Like you don't have to listen to me if you would prefer to be a hobbyist, if you don't want a career as an author, if you like your day job and you just would like to write part-time. I may not be helpful to you at all. So I guess that's like a healthy protective instinct, I think, is one of the things that I would say mistakes were made, and that's one of the tools I'd like to give new authors starting out more than anything else. And then the other thing is, and this is something I did correctly, I think, is author friends. You have to have author friends. I can't beat this dead horse enough to mix my metaphors. Sorry. You have to have them. You need author friends at the beginning of career. You need author friends who are at the same level as you. So you're going through the same things together. So you have somebody to bounce your crises off of. If you can, you need a mentor of some kind, somebody who's ahead of you in their career or by a little bit or a lot, who's willing to be like reality check and that sort of a thing. Yeah, author friends. And for me, because they come out of conventions, that's where I made them. But you know, you can make them in these kinds of environments, and online's a little bit harder. But yeah, if you can make it, I mean, this is sci-fi, fantasy, and romance were some of the last conventions standing, right? If you can go to a convention, even if it's just a little local one, and find yourself some author friends. I know it's hard. We're mostly introverts. But my author friends, I have a core group of friends that I've had since the beginning. And I still know if something comes up that I can call any one of them on the phone and be like, ah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you actually even mentioned that as like a in your heroine's journey book too, about
Mm,
the surrounding your having your crew, you know, and it was
yeah, we have to have it.
yeah.
And that's probably because, 90% of our time as authors is so solitary. We are solitary practitioners as solo artists. And yeah, I mean, I have local writer friends here in my hometown, and none of them are sci-fi fantasy authors. A couple of them are romance, but mostly they're other stuff. And it's just people I sit at cafes with, And part of that is I work well sitting across from somebody and typing in a cafe. It's just something that really works for me as a writer. And part of that is I'm at the point in my career where it's time for me to give it forward, and it's time for me to say things like this to people and be the author friend and like be a little bit of the mentor, even if my role is to gut check, somebody's first contract and like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Um, Kelsey asked, on the practical side of things, I've heard you mention before something about admin Mondays to get non-writing tasks out of the way of your drafting time. Is
Mm,
that still part of your routine? And could you
it
talk
is.
about your process for that?
Yeah, and I have to say that is still the routine even right now. I'm sort of had a chaotic 6 months, and the end of this chaotic chaos will be at the beginning of August because I'm moving or I'm relocating, and it's just been madness. So for anyone who like isn't on my newsletter, doesn't doesn't care about the Gail life. That's what's been going on. But I still do admin Mondays, even within the chaos, even knowing that I'm probably not going to get a lot done the rest of the week because I'm busy packing and doing a lot of other stuff. I always have admin Mondays, and it's just, I don't know, it kind of centers me and grounds me and gives me my targets and like gets everything sort of in a row. I know I've accomplished like a bunch of stuff in those first 8 hours of my week that are like minute detail scheduling things that I like don't want to have to think about the rest of the week, and sort of clears up my brain for writing. So I highly recommend it. Admin in the mornings is also something I do, and social media in the mornings. That's just because it works for me. But I'm not a morning person, so doing something that doesn't require my brain is best. And if you read my tweets, you'll see what an atrocious speller I am, for example. But that's because it's the morning and I don't care. Um, yeah, where was I going with this? So yeah, how do I structure them? Well, I have an assistant. She's an in-person assistant. She's remote most of the time, but on Mondays she comes into the office, and we have an agenda that we run through that is basically just a outline of things that always need to be addressed every week. And sometimes it's like monthly tasks, but we just got to make sure it gets done that month. And occasionally we'll drop, like, for example, I'm going to a convention at the end of this year that I need to ship books to, which means I need to ask my publisher to ship author copies to this location. And I just haven't done it because dealing with publishing is always such a pain in the ass, and sending the begging emails and like going through the chain and figuring out who I'm supposed to go to at my publishing house is always just a nightmare because there's always been personnel reshuffling. And but it needs to get done by a certain date in order for them to print and ship, right? So so that is like, has become a little lingering reminder every week that I actually need to do that thing and stop procrastinating. So, you know, like, so that's my agenda. And then it has things that happen every week. So example, I do a Facebook Live every month, but it's on the agenda every week because we need to talk about how we're going to promo it, what topics I'm going to discuss, whether I am actually going to do it because I don't always do it, those sorts of things. Yeah, and then we do, you know, like I do an analytics. My assistant puts together an analytics report, which is a sales analytics report, and then she puts together a social media and marketing analytics report for me, and we go over both of those, see if there have been any red flags, anything I need to contact about, Amazon squeaking about something or another, you know, that sort of a thing. And then there's just other weekly tasks. So that's about an hour to 2 hours in the morning. The two of us just go back and forth, and it helps me to have somebody to sort of bounce ideas off of and think about. And that also will include things like my itinerary that my assistant will be putting together. So like this, before it happened, we talked about it several Mondays prior to me doing this. My assistant had to constantly remind me, Gail, it's a Saturday thing. You don't always have Saturday things. So like, make sure you set the alarm, all of those sorts of stuff. So Kelly's like my second brain. And then we're talking about other going forward events. Do I need to buy a plane ticket for it? Are they covering it? Who's dealing with the hotel? You know, all of that sort of stuff gets dealt with on the Mondays as well. So yeah, it's very helpful. And then to continue to answer the question, usually Mondays happens to be my trope talk day as well. I have a little cabal of romance authors, and we talk about tropes on Mondays. So then I have a little break and have some lunch and talk about tropes with my fellow authors, which is lovely. And then that afternoon, I usually have a sort of a list of micro tasks, from 20-minute tasks to hour-long tasks that are all related to business, that just need to get done. If it emails to be sent, some sort of social media stuff to do, that sort of a stuff. If I'm running a launch campaign, there's that slot in there. If I'm under production, which means I finished the rough draft of something, I need to be reaching out to, my beta readers or editors or whatever, or turning it in if it's something that's due. That's also the time where pings will go out from me. So if I haven't heard from somebody in a while, you'll get a ping from me on a Monday, which is basically like, hey, we were talking about this contract and we never got to the signing phase. Are we still doing this? Do you need the assets? That kind of thing.
You mentioned social media a couple times in there, and it reminded me of that one of the other questions I had on the list for you, which was one of the very first presentations that I saw you give was about social media for authors.
Yeah, the
At,
branding presentation, right?
yeah, at
For
the Romance Writers.
RWA chapter, like way back.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and your advice was like pick three
Yeah.
basically, and
Yeah.
three that you like actually enjoy being on. And so is this still your general advice to authors, or
You
has your
asked this
approach?
question honestly at exactly the right time.
Oh, good, good, good.
I would say I've gone down to two. I think you need two.
Yeah.
Yes, I do still think it's necessary, and I will present evidence in a second. But I would say pick those two, and the codicil now is on different parent company platforms. So like
Oh,
I'm sorry, your two cannot be Facebook and Instagram.
yeah.
Sorry. Because they've just become so insidious about shutting down everything that's associated with that one platform if you offend anybody. And the whole idea of having multiples is you need a backup. So it's just a failure. I have a presentation I give called Failure is Just a Data Point, which is about how to protect your career. And one of the fail safes that you need in this day and age is two social medias on completely different platforms. So TikTok and Instagram, for example, are very good pairings, especially if you write YA. But I would include some sort of forgotten ones if you're very active on them and you enjoy being on them, like Pinterest, Tumblr, even. So yeah, just so long as they're two, you enjoy them and they're not in any way wedded or married to each other. So under different parent companies. And here's why. I mean, I have been watching the numbers fall on places like Facebook and stuff like that in terms of engagement, in terms of reach, all of the metrics that you study for marketing and analytics when you're looking at promoting yourself as a solo individual. And yes, aside from TikTok, and I have my doubts about TikTok, there doesn't seem to be growth on any of the social media platforms. And that's throttling of the algorithm. That's the platforms doing it because they want you to pay to play. So putting all of that aside, I decided to run a blank test on one of my books. So I have an older book that, it's like from 2016 or something, and I will be eventually writing more in this particular series. And it's a good seller for me. It has lots of reviews. It's got a very attractive cover. And so what I decided to do was simply relaunch the book. And by that, I mean, I just had all of the assets already from when I originally launched the book, all of the pretty pictures, all of the phrasing, all of the pitches, all of the hooks. I have them all because I keep everything, and I launched it once and without changing anything. So I didn't change the price point, the distribution, the cover, nothing. I just relaunched it. So I just converted my entire social media platform to promoting this very old book, which for me means I post fashion pictures that are the right color for the cover. I just I post pictures of food that's the right color. Like I just changed my whole aesthetic and everything over to focusing on this one old book. And I just wanted to see if the needle moved on that baseline. And I talked about the fact that I know my baseline sales and I know my baseline sales on every single book that's out there. And I just wanted to see if just a social media push could actually increase sales in this day and age, knowing that I have a relatively large platform and all of this stuff. And the answer, unfortunately, because man, did I wish it didn't, was it worked. It doubled the sales during the 2 weeks that I did that push.
Wow.
Unfortunately, yes, you do still have to be on social media. I was really hoping that my newsletter and my direct sales platform and all the other things that I had set up to pull people to me. But no, and frankly, in my case, it was just a lot of people who had found me since that book had come out who didn't know that I had that book with that character, and they love that character. It's a familiar character from one of my series. Yeah. And they were just like, "Oh, I didn't know you wrote about him." And I was like, "Yeah, it's been out for
Yeah,
almost a
a
decade."
while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, see, I love the experiments. This is why, yeah, you're the best to talk about this stuff. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I did not want this to be the case, but yeah, it works. Unfortunately, social media. If you have those systems in place, it really does work. Damn it.
Yeah. I have any other question about what if there was a tipping point moment for you to go to full-time author, and what was that?
Yeah, good question. And I am here to be your number one practical author type. I had 6 months emergency living and rent saved up, and I had two well, I had one continuing book series under contract with 2 books due, and I had a new book series under contract with 4 books due. So I knew if I could make all of those deadlines, I would have steady income. So again, this is at that time, right? This is a while ago when I didn't have indie set for myself in place as an option. But that was the moment where I, as a very practical, very like shaky, in her finances kind of person, I felt fine to quit my day job, which was academia. But yeah, I for me, it was 6 months living expenses saved up and 2 large book contracts before I felt like it would be okay for me to give up teaching, which was, teaching and working on my PhD was what I was doing at the time. So yeah, and I still went back. They had to call me in as adjunct faculty, so I still went back and taught for a bit, but it was just because I felt like I owed the field at that juncture. Um, for me, that was it. So yeah, I would say at least 6 months living expenses if you're going to do this. And that is banking on you being very productive. So by the time I did this, I also knew how fast I could write, which for me as a traditionally published author, 2 books a year is actually quite fast, especially if you're earning good advances on those 2 books. So I knew I could do that. An upcoming question is chasing burnout, which I also did at that time. So it turns out 2 books a year and 12 to 14 book events plus 2 book tours is not something I can handle, but learning process.
Um, yeah. Well, as long as you mentioned that, then like what 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 helped you kind of recover from burnout in terms of like once you got
Yeah.
yourself in that hole?
Learning to say no. I feel like I took a couple of years, which were the right years to do it, just saying yes. Like the publishers, like, we want to put you on book tour. And I was like, yes. And then my European publishers were like, we want to throw together a Euro book tour. And I was like, absolutely yes. Like, Gail, do you want to try this like weird Amazon 99 cents gold box thing? Yes, I want to try it. Like, yes, let's do it all. And I said yes a lot at the beginning of my career. And for me, that was the right time to do it because that's when my books were doing their best out the gate back in 2010 to 2014 or 15 thereabouts. I said yes a lot, and it was very healthy for my career. It does bring to mind the one major mistake I made at the beginning of my career, which you asked this question, and I should say it, especially to the SFF people: newsletter. My single biggest career regret is that I did not have a newsletter while I was on book tour and doing all of those early things. And that's because the idea of newsletters kind of didn't really exist yet. And also I wasn't paying close enough attention to what romance indies were doing early on in my career. I should have had a newsletter. I should have had a newsletter sign up sheet, piece of paper with me when I went on that book tour. And you all should do the same thing. A piece of paper that says sign up for, cutesy name for your newsletter or however you want to handle it. Mine's called the Cheer Up. People love to have something to do while they're waiting for you to sign their book. Readers are also introverts. They don't really want to talk to you. They're very excited to meet you, but they would love to sign up for their newsletter while you're signing their books for them. They don't want to touch your technology. That doesn't work. A piece of paper and a pen. That's the way to do it. So yeah, I spent too many years on book tour and doing all of these events and not getting people to sign up to my newsletter. And that is absolutely my single biggest regret as an author. Where were we? What were we talking about?
Oh, all sorts of
Burnout.
things. We've skipped
Oh,
all over
we
the
talked
place.
about burnout.
Yeah.
My answer to the solution is how did I handle burnout is I started to
Yeah.
say no to everything.
Yeah.
So my second book in the Custard Protocol series, Imprudence, did not hit. It was the third one. One of them, the second one, did not hit the New York Times, and mistakes were made. We're gonna put that aside because I'm not gonna throw publishers under the bus that I'm still it's technically under contract with. Um, but I turned around immediately to my agent and I was like, great. clearly this book tour thing has failed because the objective is always to make the list if you're out on book tour. And
Right.
I was like, can I never do this again? Ever. And I never have. I've never gone on book tour since. I will go, like do an event for the launch of a book or something, but I've never done the like 10 cities in 10 days mumbo jumbo that fortunately seems to be dying down in general. But yeah, so that was one of the things. And that also burnout was when I started to think in terms of indie. I was like, I can't, this business model that traditional publishing is this ringer that they're putting me through, where it's so much banked on this one or two books, where it's so much is required of me and it takes up so much of my time, when I know I can actually write fiction faster than they can produce it. And also, that's not the hardest bit. The hardest bit is like me doing tours and doing all this other stuff. Like, I need a safety net where I can get my books to my readers faster, better, and with more control than they can. And fortunately, I had the option clause in my contract that allowed me to do that, and I immediately started writing novellas. So I immediately like pulled back. It's like traditional publishing gets one book a year from me because I can live on that. Um, and I'm going to give myself 5 years to get an indie book business going. And the objective was always for indie to cover all of my living expenses. So I had an exact number in mind because I keep very good records, so I know like what I spend and what my taxes are and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, I need indie to produce X amount of money. I'm giving myself 5 years to do that. And the reason for that was to give me the luxury of saying no to traditional publishing contracts, because I had that like burnout. It's time to be able to say no. And one of the ways to say no was weirdly to give myself more work with going hybrid with a secondary indie career. But fortunately for me, it worked out. It took me 3 years to get that target rather than 5. And I have been able to say no to traditional publishing ever since.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. Um, you have definitely built a brand for yourself over time. So like a very like this Gail brand that I think really resonates with folks. But you've also branched out from that recently, and you talked about that a little bit in one of your newsletters with the sci-fi
Mm,
series that you wrote.
yeah.
Um, what can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been branching out and like what your thoughts are on that now, and how
Yeah.
that's going for you?
Well, okay, I'm going to unpack this in sort of multiple different ways, but
Sure.
very early on, one of the things that people often ask me is why I didn't have a Patreon. And one of the reasons I said then, which I still say now, is I didn't want to trade the like 2 or 3 big bosses at a traditional publisher for multiple little bosses. It's the entitlement thing over what I create that I'm scared, that I was most scared about with Patreon. So I didn't want a bunch of people who had expectations of me and what I was going to write for them. Although fans always do that, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the San Andreas things was for me to like experiment with producing something that was kind of tangential, but pretty much completely different from what I had been writing to see. Again, numbers game. I wanted to see. So I had already done quite a few of the Parasol Protectorate like series as novellas and books and tie-in series and stuff like that. So I'd already done quite a bit in the world for which I am known and for which I was established. So I knew my numbers as an indie publisher for those kinds of stories. And so I started doing the San Andreas books. And so then I knew my retention numbers. In other words, now I had been through this with trad, because I'd switched from writing adult to writing young adult. And so I had gotten the letters from people who were like, I love your adult books, but I don't read YA. And
Yeah.
I was ready for readers to be illogical about this because they very much are. Those same readers would write me 2 or 3 years later and be like, well, you hadn't written anything in this universe in so long that I just went and finally read the Finishing School series. And oh my God, they're so good. And I'm like, yeah, because it's me. Like I'm still writing, it's still my voice. Like, but readers don't understand voice. They don't understand the concept of what actually draws them into liking a book.
Right.
They understand what causes them to pick up a book, but they don't understand why they really like a thing. Readers will always reach for character and plot and stuff like that. When you ask a reader to describe why they like a story, they'll start telling you the plot of that story, or they'll start telling you about their favorite character in that story. That's not why they like it. They like it because of the author's voice. They like
Yeah.
the way that writer wrote.
Like, oh, it's a heist book. I love heist books. I'm gonna read a heist book, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, but this one's a heist book too, and you didn't like that one. So like,
Exactly. Like Leverage is a heist movie. So is Ocean's 11. Like Leverage is Ocean's 11. They're both heists. I cannot stand Ocean's 11. Love Leverage, right? Like it's got nothing to do with that, everybody. I'm sorry to all the trope mongers out there. Um, but you can't tell that. There's no way to market that sort of top down.
right.
And so what I was interested in is, how many people would follow me from one established universe and style to a different one. And the retention, I'm here to tell all of you, and this is, I think, relatively well known if Trad ever decided to, track the numbers. Retention is about 1/3 to 2/3 if you're lucky. You're never going to pull your entire original reader base from one series to another series when you're switching genres or subgenres. The readers they just aren't. There are readers who are like, I read your steampunk stuff, Gail, and I am not interested in anything else. And I'm like, okay, all right. And that's about 1/3 of that reader base, which is my biggest reader base. And so that means to write something that's outside of that universe, I am sacrificing at least 1/3 of the income I could get from the same number of words if I wrote those words for the steampunk universe. Now I'm being like very concretely numbers
Yeah.
focused because we aren't like that, right? Like I didn't want to write another Parasol book. I'd written 25 of them already. Like I wanted to write something else, right? Um, so that's why I put all these systems in place to have enough money to be able to be like meh, because I'm doing meh to trad, but I'm also in a way doing it to my readers. And I have to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna write this other thing, everybody. Be patient. I'll write something you want eventually, but in the meantime, I have to do this. And I for this series that we're talking about, the Tinker and Starsong series, which is what I would call a pretty hard sci-fi series. It's social science based, so it isn't hard tech, but it's hard and then it's very juicy in lots of concepts. It's very meaty, it's very philosophical in its weird Gale way. And I'm dealing with a lot of things around celebrity and culture conflict and all this other stuff. And I needed to write it, and it needed to be sci-fi because it was the only thing I left lockdown being able to write. And
Yeah.
so in lockdown, I couldn't write either of my two existing series. I couldn't write San Andreas because it's set in the current day. And I was like, the current day is a nightmare. How do I write comedy? And I couldn't write Parasolverse because I was like, I'm not feeling that whimsical. Um, and I was grappling with all these things that included at the time a new bored obsession with K-pop and K-dramas and Hallyu and the way South Korea is running this sort of soft power propaganda machine from an archaeological perspective or an anthropology perspective. It's the most interesting thing I've ever encountered in my adult life. I was like, this is fascinating. And I was like, and to unpack and deal with that, and my own feelings about a very minor version of celebrity, um, I had to leave the planet. And that also really helped free me from the current like social political situation that we were all living in at the time. And I was like, oh, it's sci-fi. And guess what? I can write sci-fi. I get to do that. And then I spat out 3 books, but they were 3 books that my core fan base is like, what?
What?
Because I was like, the aliens are coming for us and they want our K-pop. And my fans are like, Gail, we have followed you to some very crazy places, but we're not sure if we can go there. um,
Just
we're not
try it. You'll like it, I swear.
exactly. Exactly. I was like, yeah, but this is what I wrote. And there's 3 whole freaking books. Like this is over 280,000 words. I was like, this is what you're getting. And it's, like yeah. And so but it was a rough road because I love these books. I think they're the best thing I've ever written, but they are a very hard sell. They're not commercial at all, and they're even a hard sell to my core existing fan base. And so, in the end, I think I got about half of that base on board with these books, and the people who love them really love them, and the people who find them and aren't my fans really love them. So there are a few people looking for them, and they've done fine by any indie standards, but they have not done as well as I wanted them to do. And that was a learning experience all round, including me to be very much more grounded in my expectations when I really go outside of their comfort zone. I wasn't outside of mine, but I was outside of my readers. Um, so yeah, but I still think they're the greatest thing I've ever written.
I mean, I'm excited about it. So we have been talking for a long time. I'm gonna maybe wrap up with a couple of questions about advice, and like I'm gonna split them in two. So like, what advice do you have for the early career writers just starting out in the current publishing market, as somebody who's been around for in that mentor, with your mentor hat on?
Be careful about saying yes to things, and like I said already, and start a newsletter. I don't care if you have 5 fans and they're mostly your family. Getting yourself into the habit of writing a newsletter is the first and most important thing. It's like finding yourself on a social media platform that you actually enjoy using. Um, I don't care how you do that newsletter, so long as you get habituated to it, whether it's once a month or once a week or once every 2 weeks, whatever works for you, however you want to deliver it. You can sign up for mine if you want to see how it's done. The answer to the what should I the answer to the what should I write thing is, what do you want to hear from your favorite author? Write that. You can sign up for mine and you'll see how it's segmented. If you want to do something similar to that, you can do that. Your newsletter is for your readers. It's not for your fellow authors. That's very, very important, unless you are writing nonfiction, of course. Um, and yeah, and the answer to people who are like, yeah, but Gail, I don't know what to write, is you are a writer and it's your job. So write a newsletter. Yay! I don't care. You can write your newsletter about what's making you happy, the K-drama you're currently watching, the like new recipe. I mean, I just included a salad recipe off the cuff in my last newsletter, and you would not believe how many people got excited about that. I was like, oh, you guys want salads? Okay, sure, whatever. Yeah, do what works, make it fun, make it something you would enjoy reading. It's your job to write, and it's your job to be an entertainer. So write an entertaining newsletter, period. Don't, I'm not gonna hold your little hand, everybody. Like, suck it up, do the thing.
I I was I remember I also subscribed to Courtney Milan's newsletter because she does a really good newsletter too, and hers is like mostly about tea for the most part, and it's
Wonderful.
great. And
Yeah.
but she talked about tofu one time, and then and like her next, and she's just like, yeah, but you guys don't want to hear me talk about tofu. And then like in the next newsletter, it was like, okay, apparently everyone wants me to talk
Everyone
about
wants to. Oh my God, have I hacked tofu? I gotta say, I have the greatest like puffy crispy tofu recipe in the universe. The secret, everybody, is to buy soft tofu and freeze it. That's the tofu secret. But maybe I'll talk about that in a newsletter.
There you go. It's
Yeah,
perfect.
the
Great.
other author I would highly recommend who has a really good weekly newsletter, who's a romance author, is Lucy Score. She's a really big deal in contemporary, like comedic contemporary romance, and she has a killer newsletter. It is not like mine at all. It is an entirely different example of what an author newsletter can be. It's hugely popular. So, it's worth subscribing to a couple of newsletters that people recommend. Yeah, I mean, and then just create yourself a little like template or whatever. I mean, I write to outlines, so that's very helpful for me. But whatever makes it easiest for you. But yeah, do a newsletter. That's my one piece of advice. That's my piece of advice to older SFF authors as well, who sidle up to me at cocktail parties and say, Gail, about this newsletter thing. And I go, how many years have you been an author?
Okay, so for those who've been around a while and maybe are struggling to stay motivated or feeling discouraged and stuff like that, what advice do you have for those folks?
Struggling to stay motivated. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, the dirty secret, and I'm probably telling this to people who know it, is that every time you sit down to write, it's different. Like, I'm a person who tries to put systems in place, and then I'm like, well, this book is going to break that system, because every book does. But like, figure out what works for you. Jealously guard your writing time, whatever that writing time is, or however it is ritualized. And just remember the old adage that the person who takes your writing career the most seriously is not your agent, it's not your editor, it's you. And you have to put whatever in place helps you put the words on the page. If that's you don't get to eat chocolate until you've written your 2,000 words for the day, that's one of mine. I'm motivated. So that's how I motivate myself. Yeah. Yeah, I don't like long-term career. The other piece of advice I would give to a lot of existing authors, especially mid-listers, is I'm sorry, but you have to consider self-publishing. I'm sorry. Um, yeah, yeah, and a direct sales model, which I took a very long time to set up and is now like partly sustaining me entirely.
Wow.
Um, I mean, I'm writing a book for everybody who wants answers to this particular question. It's just the next nonfiction book I'm coming out is going to be about going hybrid. So how to take an existing career and turn it into a successful hybrid model where you do both traditional and self-publishing. Um, it's gotten a bit bloated. It's about 120,000 words now, and it might be 2 books. Like, God damn it, I have a lot to say on this. Um,
I can imagine.
yeah.
Yeah.
But also, like, again, like, it doesn't matter what you write. I mean, we're talking to the romance, so what we write is comfort and fun and sexy, and and give that out into the world. If that's what you write, I write humor. It's very good for me. It means that I can put humor into my newsletter. I can talk about humorous things on the internet, but keep that, like, whatever your voice is, keep that voice alive. Like, keep the thing you enjoy writing, the thing you enjoy doing on your social media or wherever else. Um, and that's what's kept me motivated, is like, oh, I don't want to get onto social media. It's gonna be full of politics or whatever. But I know my feed is going to be full of cute cat videos and a hedgehog and orcas wearing dead salmon as hats. It's going to be great. So if I
I
can
love
curate my environment as much as possible, both in real life to write and online to make talking about that writing more entertaining for everybody, um, that's what I do as much as possible.
it. Thank you so much for coming and talking with me today and answering everyone's
Oh, it's a
questions.
pleasure.
Oh, this
I
is
wish we had had more, but yeah.
I don't want to keep you too long. And I do want to like, I know folks want to socialize and stuff like that too. So you're welcome to stick around and do the casual socializing bit as well. I want to make sure that we're
I
keeping.
probably will because
Okay.
I'm happy to be distracted and
Yeah.
but I might go get some tea.
All right. Cool. All right. So, Megan, if you want to stop the recording.